Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. That was a loud beep. And I'm here with Jay and Tim.
We didn't hear it.
Really?
I didn't hear a beep. So
okay, the directional mic is working.
Yeah.
I guess.
only one of the three of us is having psychosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle, welcome back to you. You've been gone forever.
Yeah, I have been. I have been traveling. I went to New York.
Oh, nice.
Welcome.
I brought my kids back a bagel,
Good.
which even though it was stuffed in my carry-on bag and several hours old, they said was the best bagel they've ever had. And my daughter went so far as to say, Daddy, whenever we want a bagel, can you go to New York? And I talked her down to, whenever I go to New York, I will bring you a bagel. Because
I feel like, wouldn't that count? Maybe you could like make that a business expense, right? Like somehow write that as a business expense.
Yeah.
I had to go.
I had to get a bagel for my daughter, I had to get on a plane.
Yeah.
Get a bagel.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, anyway, confirmation that New York has tasty bagels. I don't know what it is. I know the joke
It's
is
the water.
Yes, I understand that is the joke. But there's definitely
joke.
it's definitely something.
It's not a
Maybe-
joke.
maybe it
really
is the water.
Yeah.
What's so
I've-
special about the water?
I've been to places in Florida that they call themselves New York Bagel, and like you go in and you're like,
yeah.
oh, why are you New York Bagel? And they actually literally
They import
their
the water. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a pizza place in DC that claims to import its water from New York.
Yeah.
Um
It's something with the mineral content or something like that. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. They're really good.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, so I'm back. I'm here. I'm excited to talk about Legion with you guys. I'm glad to see you guys. So
Yeah, I'm all right seeing you, I guess. I mean, my thing has been that we've been recording at really reasonable times the
I know.
last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
which has been really nice for me and my family.
See, I think this is reasonable though. This is good. This works out. This is nice. Because everything else in my life is done by now. So it's good.
Yeah, that's fair.
Unless I tried to fit it. Ironically, I tried to fit a Legion game in before this, and I couldn't find anyone that was able to make it work. But
So I kind of have like a little bit opposite thing from Kyle, where like, this is bedtime, right? So all your kids are in bed or on their way to being in bed. All my kids are older, so like, they're like roaming the house right now, so like they're up and I can like talk to them, but yeah,
the image of just them roaming around the house, like just not saying words, just going,
dude,
and,
it's
like,
pretty
bumping into walls,
pretty
and things
freaking
like that.
close. But like, we're
like
just,
creeps in a
Yeah,
video
exactly.
game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just we've got so much going on. We have 3 teenagers and a 12-year-old, and so like, two of them are getting jobs but don't have their licenses yet. So like we're like I carted one to an interview today, and then I had to pick the other one up from work. And then, our oldest, he's got his license, but he works at job, and so he's not even home yet. Like it's just like, so like he usually rolls in around 9:00. So like it's nice to see him, but I can't because I have to come here and record this stupid podcast with Kyle.
What Jay is trying to say is he loves to be here and spend time with us, and we're important enough that he carves out time for us in his busy schedule.
Yeah. So anywho, yeah, I mean that's where I'm at. No, it's good to have you back, Kyle. We miss you.
Yeah.
We had 2 international podcasts. So the
I
first
saw
one,
that.
we
Yeah.
had Lucas and Timbo, and then the second one, Lucas and AJ. It was good. It was good to get different perspectives, but it's good to be back with the regulars, the old regulars.
Yep. And one of Tim's 2 shoulders.
Yep.
On screen there.
I keep catching that. I don't know how to.
Because you're wearing the shirt, the shoulders are like the same color as your background.
It keeps disappearing. It's great. There we go.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
we are going to talk about Legion at some point today. But first, you got any housekeeping for us, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, get on Patreon, become a Patreon supporter, buy stuff from us, the usual.
Do we need to bring like Alec Baldwin in here to fire up the sales pitch there?
ABC.
ABC.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah. All right.
this stuff. I'm
That's
not in the
fair.
mood. I'm not in the mood.
No, I'm
And
with you.
I don't think the
I'm
listeners are either. So
yeah,
just
that's fair. Um, all right. Well, all right, let's just get right into it. Before we started the cast, Jay, you were talking about why don't we start with hobby before we get to our other topic? Tell us about your wondrous discovery of technical paints, Jay.
so
Welcome.
yeah, so the thing is, and I started this with these guys that Kyle told me to shut up and just wait for the podcast. So here we are. So years and years ago, when I did Warhammer Fantasy and I started my hobby journey, I started with Citadel paints, and I have a bunch that I've bought over the years, and they stay pretty well for me as long as I keep them tightly closed. But I've slowly been moving through, I have a lot of army painter. I really like their airbrush paints. They're really nice. And I like some of the regular paints because they're a little bit thinner and stuff. And now actually recently I've been painting a lot with Monument Hobby. They're really, really good. I really like their pro acrylics line. And so I haven't really used technicals in a long time. Just like the basing technicals, like some of the like iron crust surface and stuff like that. And the mud one, that's pretty much the stuff that I've used. So I saw a post today. Funny enough, it was in MCP. And somebody painted they used like a statue, and they painted it to look like oxidized, and in my head,
Like oxidized, like copper,
like copper, yeah, like oxidized,
yeah.
that's got the green,
Or
and then you
brass,
could
I
see the
think,
brass
right?
through it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yep.
So in my head, I just did a table for Adepticon. I painted one for them where I did oxidized copper for the roof. For a Ferrex table, I hand painted all of that. Like that was all hand painted. And it looked great, don't get me wrong. But I saw this, and then I saw in the comments someone was like, "Oh, how'd you do that?" And they were like, this technical called nilic oxide or something
It's
like
the
that.
oxide, yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
I
literally
was
called oxide, yeah.
yeah, and I was like, "What?" And then when I went to buy it, it recommended typhus corrosion, and
Another
then
good one. Yeah.
yeah, and then also Ryza rust for dry. And I was just like,
I don't have that one.
"Oh, these already
It's good.
exist?" Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I was like, what the? I've been like creating this and doing like salt rubs and so I don't know if you guys know how to do that. Have you ever seen that? So basically,
This sounds like a spa treatment.
yeah. So what I do is I spray paint like a reddish orange tint, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the model for the base. Then what I do is I use hairspray and a little bit of like kosher salt, the big flaky
Mm-hmm.
salt, and you
Yep.
stick it on there in different parts where you want to like the rust come through. And then you hit over all of that. You hit over that with whatever the top layer color is going to be. Okay. So in this case, this was a rusted ATST that I did. And so you hit it with a gray. And then what you do is you take a brush, like a toothbrush, you wet it a little bit, and you just rub it all over the model. And wherever that salt was, it'll peel off, and it'll look like layered rust. And so that's how I do rusting. And then or I hand paint the rusting, right? And that's the other way I do it. So this is how I've been doing it for a few years. And I didn't know that I could be saving myself a lot of time and heartache by just getting this technical. So here we are.
It's funny you say ATSD because that's I use it on especially my Imperial vehicles. I'll do the oxide like right in the joints, and then normally coming off of the joints or something like that, it'll be some of the corrosion or vice versa, something like that. Those two I use back and forth. Just depends. But yeah, they're
Yeah.
great.
I really like the oxide one and the typhus corrosion. I will say that your mileage may vary on the rust one. I personally prefer the look of just like hand painted rust over the riser rust thing, but the riser rust thing is definitely less effort. On the other hand, like that oxide one, it is significantly easier than doing it by hand, and I think it also looks better.
It does, and
So
I'll say too, between the corrosion and the rust, or the oxide rather, I've found, at least in my use, it tends to be that the oxide drips more in a good way. So like it looks like use gravity as your friend, and so make it look like wherever it would naturally drip, like from a joint or something like that, wherever it's like oozing from or whatever you want to call it, it would just naturally kind of do that. And like the typhus corrosion does that as well, but I found that the oxide does it a little bit better. But yeah, it's a really cool effect.
Yeah. So I saw this, somebody actually, that was really interesting. Actually, it's one of our listeners who's also doing MCP now, Houston Cadwell. So he posted in the Marvel Crisis Protocol. What he did was he took, and this might be something cool for Legion, actually, that you could do for Legion, not just for MCP, is I don't know if you guys ever saw the Disney Infinity game that they had, where it was kind of like Spyro, where they had these, so basically it was these little
I never played
like
it,
statues that you would put on a base for the video game, and they would activate that character in the game, right? And so there are these really neat, like, animated versions of these characters. And so what he did was he took one of those and he painted it with that oxidized paint, and so it looks like a bronze, like a statue that's been, that's rusting in some beginning the oxidation process, right? And so in Disney Infinity absolutely had Star Wars ones as well, so you could do it for that too. But yeah, it's a really cool idea, and I saw it and somebody asked him how he did it, and it's just that paint, and I was just like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
And it saves a lot of time. It's a lot quicker than whatever the heck you were talking about.
Yeah.
Putting salt on my models.
I have heard of that. I've heard of the hairspray thing too, with just like weathering generally, because when you put hairspray over a model and then you paint over it, it basically makes it so that the paint doesn't like stick. So you can, you do like I tried this with a T-47 and it was a complete disaster. So maybe I'm not like the best authority on this. I ended up like stripping the whole thing, starting over and just doing it by hand, and then it looked way better. But if you do your undercoat, like Jay said, and then you can, instead of the salt thing, you just spray it with hairspray, and then you do whatever you want the actual color to be, and then you take a toothbrush and you just score it. Then the scoring will show through, because it'll peel that top layer off, and then the under layer will show through it. When I did it, it looked absolutely terrible. So maybe you shouldn't try it.
Yeah, Jay, when you said the salt thing, I thought you meant just like literally just putting salt on the model and just leaving it. And that's why I was like, yeah, I've heard of that before. But what you said makes a lot more sense. So that's good.
Yeah, the true salty tears. It's actually putting actual salt
like
on your
table
mayonnaise.
salt.
No, I know. It's but it's like big kosher
Just bring a salt
Yeah,
shaker.
it's like yeah.
Yeah. There was some guy in the X-Wing scene many years ago. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Brett. Crazy man that he is. I forget who it was, but he would just bring around a container of Morton salt, and then if he beat you, or if you beat him, something like that, you would sign it, and that was just his trophy of tears. It's good.
Trophy of tears. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on technicals?
Yeah, they exist apparently. So
they do, and they're great.
Here we go.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not a fan of like some of the other, like I know some people like contrast paints. That's not for me. But like the technical paints and then the basing texture paints are awesome, in my opinion.
I go back and forth on contrast paint, but that's a whole nother.
Yeah,
It
I
depends. It depends.
I feel like it's a very distinctly different look. And at least if you're working with an airbrush, it's you can duplicate the speed while getting a much more like quote unquote normal looking finish.
Yeah, every time I've used the contrast recently, I've found like, oh, I could duplicate this better if I just based it and then put
a wash or
layer
something
on it, or
yeah.
a wash on it. Yeah.
But I know some people like them. I know some people have been able to do some really cool stuff with them. Like there's some pretty advanced painting techniques you can do with contrast paints. That's not a part of my brain that I've taken the time to train. So
and for some of them, especially the high pigment ones, some of them are really, really beautiful, and they like give you a really unique finish. Like Flesh Terror's red is probably my favorite because it's like a really deep, rich red. And I think there's a purple that I really like too. But yeah.
All right. Should we move on to topic number 2A?
Sure.
Actually, so there's something that I briefly want to talk about. It's a forum ruling.
Hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses. Yeah, literally like within the last hour or so, this popped up. So the short version is that historically, and whether this was correct or not, this is what was done everywhere for the most part, is when you force push a unit that has an objective token, the player doing the force pushing, since they're moving the unit leader, places the objective token, which meant that if you had a force user and you were playing like hostage or recover or something like that, you could place that objective token in a spot where you could base it with one of your units or even with the force user potentially, depending on how the melee is. And so basically it gave you control over the final placement of that objective token. So there's a forum ruling coming out basically that said, I guess the language, the actual text says, let me make sure I get this correct. After the unit performs any movement, that unit's controlling player may pick up any claimed objective tokens and place them in base contact with the unit leader. Something else just occurred to me here, which is weird also, but let's focus on the controlling player bit, because that's the part that was interpreted by this forum ruling. Basically, it was ruled that controlling player means not the player that is controlling the move, but the player that actually owns the unit that is being moved. So not the player doing the force push.
Yeah,
which
some weird verbiage there, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be more clear if it said like owning player, because to me, a controlling player is the player that's controlling the unit when they're force pushing it.
Right, because technically I'm moving your unit with the force push.
Yeah, it's like a weird inconsistency. Like you're controlling the unit leader's movement, you're controlling the cohesion of the minis, but you're not controlling the objective token placement.
This will probably be cleared up in a later ruling. So.
It could be, yeah. I mean, maybe by the time this comes out, it'll maybe the language will say owners. Maybe was that a joke?
That was a salty joke. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone was joking that they should make a T-shirt that said like this will be clarified in a future update. I think is the precise language.
That's the quote. Yeah. Sorry, it's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, this will be clarified in a future update. Anyway, long story short, if this stands, I think this is a pretty big nerf to force users generally, and specifically Yoda and force users with force choke.
Yeah,
who are kind of the force users that have leveraged the quote unquote claim objectives, which primarily are recover and hostage, technically bombing run also, but mostly recover and hostage as like strong objectives for them. And I feel like this is a pretty significant nerf to their ability to control those objectives.
Yeah, because you could, especially like you said with the choke ones. I didn't even think about the choke one, but you're absolutely right. Like I was thinking of Yoda, but yes, with the choke one, because you can move, put the objective closest to you or almost touching you or whatever,
or touching you,
or touching you, if possible, and then choke out whoever's carrying it.
This is a pretty big like balance change.
But I'm also the person that harps against force push and force choke are too cheap. So I don't know. I go back and forth, but I also play them all the time. So like I'm my own worst enemy, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe we can have that conversation on a future cast, but like I get that argument, except that they're not really cheap because they're attached to very expensive characters almost universally.
Sure.
Like that force
Sure.
upgrade slot is locked behind, minimum
Sure.
155 points. Whereas like if you look at characters that don't have force slots that are also very good in melee, like Grievous, right? Grievous is what, 150. He doesn't have a force slot and he's terrible because like it's if you were to take a force user and like remove force push or force choke from their kit, but they would be Grievous.
I was
Like
just gonna say, yeah, we know what they look like, and
it's General Grievous.
There,
yeah,
that's right. There you go.
Like it's not an efficient melee profile for what you're paying for, and it's not an efficient defensive profile either. Like the Grievous has 8 health. Most force users have like 5 or 6. The thing that makes force users that expensive is the fact that they can do unique things with their force abilities.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
No, that's fair. And and again, like you said, this might be a separate cast, but I do agree with, and I know this has been said before, maybe I think by developers or something like that, but I don't like that. I don't like that for every force user that exists, force push is just an auto include. Like it's annoying to me. I get it. I don't think it's wrong. Like I get, like right now that's what you should do, but like I just don't like that design space. I think it's kind of boring. Like if you give me 2 force slots, I want to have the conversation of what should I be putting in these 2 force slots, not, oh, you gave me 2 force slots, so really I only have 1 because one's force push.
I'd rather force push just be like a thing that all force users could do.
I agree.
Just natively, and then you just I think that's a thing too that's also not unique to the force slot. There's just not. I feel like we have in the game we have slot variety, and then within those slots there's kind of like an upgrade for each role, if that makes sense. Like if you have a melee unit, your training upgrade is tenacity.
Sure.
So I think it's the same with the training slot. I think it's the same with the command slot. So I don't think that's
or push depending on your weapon profile. Like if you have like lethal or something like that, and no tactical or something.
I have not seen push since it went to 6 points.
Well, that's also very true. It's not on my Wookiees anymore. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, right. I bet tenacity still is though.
If I can, yeah. If I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like a separate and I don't even know if that's an issue because I feel like I don't know. That's a separate conversation. But I would say that I don't think that the fact that the force slot has like a handful of upgrades that are significantly better than the other ones are. I don't think that's unique to the force slot. Let's put it that way.
No, I agree. I agree. Maybe it's just for me, it's the most pronounced. Like that's where I see it the most. But again, I agree. It's not the only slot that has that problem.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts on that, Jay? You were totally silent on that topic. Is that just not something that you care about?
No, I agree with. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's clearly
it's a hard-hitting interview question.
Yeah.
So, do you hate force users, Jay? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
No, I mean I don't know. It's just hard to talk about this stuff because sometimes I just feel like some of the decisions they make are just really willy-nilly, and it's just like, okay, why? Just and I don't like the forum either because it's like I feel like sometimes it's not like really thought out. It's just like the answer that whoever the moderator gave that day, and now it's a rule. And so it's like, so this is the way we've been doing it for this entire time. But because today somebody asked a forum ruling, it completely got reversed and it's wrong. And but they'll never go back and say that it's wrong. They'll just be like, this is the ruling.
Yeah,
and
this
like
is how it was interpreted.
Yeah, and 90% of the people will never know, and 10% of us will know, and then it'll come up at some tournament, and we'll get in somebody will get in a big fight, and be like, oh, but it was in the forum. Don't you read the forum? And this other person could be like, what the hell is the forum? Right. And like, this is how it always goes. And so I just get mostly frustrated, and not even from a competitive standpoint. Like, that's fine because we all read the forums, and by the time you get to like a highly competitive, most people will know. But like, it's just like,
I feel like I like the concept of a forum FAQ. I think that it's good to have a place, because there will always be some gray areas, and I think it's good to have a place to go to get those clarified. I feel like since the CRB, we are leaning on the forum significantly more than previously.
Yeah.
And
you
for
took the
stuff
words
that
out of
is
my
like,
mouth.
and for stuff that is like really important, like the cover rules, the interpretation of the cover rules, there's that forum clarification that says essentially that it's all to all, not pick a point. And the reason that has to be a forum clarification is because a significant number of people, when they read the text in the CRB, they think that it is attacker picks a point. A, because that makes more sense, but B, that's kind of what it says. And it's funny because you can see, I mean, there's a million places this topic occurs, but one of them is Mbueha Ben from Team Relentless put a video up on cover, I think at this point now, months ago, but it still generates comments on the YouTube, and you can see like the evolution of people's thought process, because they'll post something and be like, the first post is like, no, you're wrong, that's stupid, that's not how it works. And then
and
then there'll be and then somebody will respond and be like, actually that is how it works, and be like, no, that's dumb, like here's the text from the CRB, like attacker picks a point. And then someone will post like the forum ruling, and then the original poster is like, oh wow, that's really stupid.
Yeah,
like,
you know what it is? It is the Legion version of the episode 5 scene of on Bespin, where like when Luke and Vader are talking, and it's just like, no, that's not true.
Yeah.
That's impossible.
That's impossible.
And then you just scream no, and you dive off the cliff, and you embrace it because you're like, all right.
Yeah, and it's like, search your feelings, you know it to be true.
I don't know.
You're like, you're right, I do.
Yeah.
Bye. Whee!
Well,
Yeah.
and like, I guess maybe why I was being, I'm trying to think through this, but screw it, I'll just do it out loud. So
Okay.
like, I've been trying to be positive, because I feel like a lot of things that have been happening lately have been pretty positive. I don't, I like some of the units coming out. I think some of that's been really balanced. Sure, there's some things here and there, like
Dark Troopers.
we don't have to keep going over it, but Dark Troopers and Blizzard Force that were clearly not tested enough, and that's okay. That happens, right? That happens in every game. That happens, and so I was okay with that. And Ahsoka looks pretty good. Ventress is good. Cody looks fine. Like they look good. They look good.
All the characters they've put out are actually pretty fine.
Yeah.
I think.
And so everything's been really positive. Their communication's been good. Like, things have been relatively positive. And I've been trying to stay on because I can really swing to the negative really quick. And it's just stuff like this that just drives me insane, because it's just like, whoever made that decision just has just not played enough, because you would never say that was the answer based on playing, like, because that doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I think I agree, but then I think if we're gonna have big, not just game changing rulings and form rulings, but like kind of like almost like game theory changing, because like that changes the whole outlook of how a Force user could play potentially, especially like objective play and things like that.
Yeah, which is like the primary thing they bring to the table.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
I think it would be really beneficial, and this is probably a pipe dream, but let me have my dreams. I think it'd be really beneficial to have someone come on and just say, hey, here's why we did this. Like, here's our rationale for it. Even if whether you agree or disagree, it would just be really nice to hear, like, hey, here's what we were thinking. And you might say, like, well, I disagree with that, but okay, at least I know your rationale. That's nice to know. Instead of just like, this is the way it is. Good luck.
It feels like kind of a black box sometimes.
Yeah. And again, it feels, I wouldn't say willy-nilly. I know when you guys said that before, but I wouldn't say willy-nilly.
That's not a Kyle word. That's a Jay word.
Arbitrary.
Yeah, arbitrary, willy-nilly are two sides of the same coin. Same kinds of the silly coin.
I don't know. It's They
but
could,
it does feel like kind of at not random, but it just kind of feel like very swinging back and forth.
well, because
How about that?
this is why. This is why. This is a company that has made it very clear, and I don't mind this, right? As someone who plays MCP right now, I don't mind this thought process, right? Is that, hey, we're making these games to have fun. It's about having fun and rolling dice and going out and having a good time. Okay, that's great. Then stop having world championships for Legion and setting an and worlds invites and setting an expectation for a high level competitive scene, but then treat all the rules as if it's just we're just having fun here, guys. Like those are two different thoughts. And you can't do both, right? So MCP, there's no worlds. There's not a world championship. It's just, hey, come play at Adepticon. I guess LVO is kind of like the community's world championship, quote unquote, because it's, but like it's not a real world's championship. It's not a sanctioned world's championship like Legion, X-Wing, and Armada are, right? They're sanctioned world's championship. If that's what you're doing, if you're giving out invites to a world's event, expecting everybody to be competitive, you can't then on the same side arbitrarily, willy-nilly make rules changes that we've all like that makes sense for a competitive scene. It's just driving me crazy.
I second that, and I hear that. But again, I think you can if you explain what your thought process is. Like, just you don't even have to justify yourself.
You can't.
Just say what
you can't, because you can't have the Super Bowl or the World Series and then arbitrarily change rules in the lead up to it. Like
It's and this kind of comes back maybe to the thing that
I'm all fired up.
The main topic. Maybe we should jump on this while Jay is fired up.
There you
go. There was a conversation in our Discord about like, well, I can't wait for the balance changes, and Legion feels kind of stale right now, and it could shake things up. And there were several responses that basically were like, is that really the reason that Legion feels stale, or is it something else? And I think it's actually multiple factors. Don't get me wrong, we need some points changes for sure. Like Dark Troopers and Blizzard, people are sick of them. There's other things that, it's not just those two things either, right? But I think it's also I don't want to get into the cover changes on this episode because we've done that extensively, but that is something that at least for me personally, I found fun and fresh and unique to Legion from a tactical perspective, and also from an ease of play perspective, frankly. And now it's just cumbersome and also not fun. And that like takes away a huge part of it for me. But we've done episodes on that in the past. I don't want to revisit it. The other thing is that like the objectives, people are like, well, we need an objective overhaul. And this conversation wasn't being had, 6 months ago. And now it is. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The core reason is, and this is kind of Jay's point, is that the game was built on like a different foundation than what's being applied to it now, which is, look, that's fine. But if that's the case, then like some of the, like there's some easy fixes, I think, to some of these objectives that will like move them closer to the new. It seems like they're trying to move it from more of like a, like a positioning chess match to like beer and pretzels, slam stuff at each other and throw dice. Which, look, like if that's the idea, that's fine. But like the objectives were not built on that same foundation. And that's why some of them are starting to feel stale, is because you've taken away a lot of that positional nuance in that chess match, but you haven't actually changed like the thing that you're trying to accomplish in a way that jives with that. And a couple of them are simple things too. Like they've essentially removed two of the 8 objectives, 25% of the objectives from competitive play with some of the CRB changes. The first is payload. When they made it not fly anymore, you introduce a reasonably high chance that one player could just be completely unable to score before the game starts, and that objective is not going to get taken. And it's not we saw from, this is in I think our last one shots, maybe even 2 months ago, one shots. But payload was the least taken battle card at the World Championships out of all, not just the objectives, but all the battle cards, and it was not close. Like, and that's because like you can't risk just not being able to win. And that's not fun either. And that's such a simple thing. Like they made it so, again, not appreciating nuance. They made it so the payload couldn't fly anymore, and that effectively deleted it from competitive play. And the other one is VAPS. The change to the tiebreak does basically the same thing, because VAPS often devolves to kill points. And clearly you could say that that is a core issue with VAPS and not the tiebreak rules.
Sure.
And I think that's fine, but then you have to change the VAPS objective. You can't just make the tiebreak change that deletes VAPS from the game without changing VAPS. Like,
I think there's a
for
real
years. We need a fifth VAP. Give me a fifth VAP.
I think there are a lot of different ways you could do it.
Give me a fifth VAP right in the middle, KP style. Boom, as close as you can get to the middle of the map. Fifth Vaporator. Boom.
And I have an opinion on that. I think that would be an improvement. Clearly, I actually think a lot of the objectives rely too much on a single thing in the middle. Like what I would do personally is I would make it so that you have to place the VAP that you place has to be like within range 2 of your opponent's deployment zone, or within range 3 of your opponent's deployment zone, or something like that. And then you basically end up with, maybe you still do 4 VAPs, but you basically end up with like they're kind of in similar locations, but they're on the wrong side of line of sight blockers and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. And then you can actually zone them instead of, it just like you can safely do your VAPs and it devolves to kill points. It puts them more in play. That's another way to put them more in play. But I feel like the danger with the fifth VAP thing is that you just get like recover, where the 2 quote unquote home objectives kind of don't matter, and then it's all about the middle one. I think I'd like to see some of those quote unquote safe objectives matter more, but
no, I agree with that. I would say that the 2 home objectives kind of don't matter already, because then it was just a kill game, more or less.
I mean, sometimes they matter, but yes, I agree.
Sometimes, sure. In a traditional competitive game, it's like, okay, we're going to put ours in the safest location possible.
Right.
Tap it with our 1 courage unit in the backfield, and then we're good, unless someone has something to counteract that, but that's a whole different level.
I would personally, so maybe we can hit VAPs first. Personally, what I would do is I would hit the core issue there, and I would make those home VAPs actually in play, essentially, rather than adding like, because then functionally a fifth VAP is the same thing as just having 1 VAP. Like you might as well just put 1 Vaporator in the middle of the table,
Sure. Yeah. That's true.
I would make it so that like, the VAPs that you're placing have to be within range something of your opponent's deployment zone, rather than, must be range X away from your own deployment zone kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So that would be my VAPs change.
I know we're talking objectives, but I do want to, the way you said that, just maybe think about it. We never ever talk about this. No one ever talks about it, but I do think it's actually a little bit of like a low-key issue, especially with cover changes. I wish that fortified positions was range 1 from your deployment, not range 2. Because it's basically, most of the time, the entire map just gets covered in barricades.
Yeah, I also wish it was like half as many barricades.
Agree.
Yeah.
But like the fact that I can most deployments, like we're almost touching barricades, like it's just, come on, like what are we doing? And again, with the cover changes now, especially, like it just makes it
where you can hide
entire
4 separate units behind 1 barricade.
Right. And it's you're basically deciding like, okay, this entire game's going to be a heavy cover game, which it kind of already is anyway, but then you're just guaranteeing it. But anyway, I know it's not objective, but it feeds into objectives.
Yep.
I think what this game needs is seasons. I think that you don't have because here's why, Kyle. I see you pouting over there, Mr. Competitive.
That was not a pout.
And here's my
an eyebrow raise.
There you go. Eyebrow
because how many times would we change when things are static, like an objective or a condition or a deployment? In static, I mean, the same card, right? When we're keeping that one objective, how many times can you change it for every time you change the rules or something comes out that breaks it, right? So my thought is, if you did seasons, you could keep some of these in there or rotate them through, but maybe the seasons are how the evaporators work, or how different objectives or conditions work for this season based on where we are at the rules, based on where we are at with the meta. And then that could be a way of kind of keeping things balanced as well, because sometimes things become unbalanced because everything's changing around it, but these certain things are staying static.
I think my issue with that is, I think that would require more work than current to actually make it implemented in a way that makes for a good game.
Yeah, maybe.
Because part of the problem right now is not that like some objectives are better than others, or that you can like heavily skew your deck. It's that we're essentially playing with 6 objectives instead of 8, and that makes it less interesting.
Sure.
I'm always in favor of kind of addressing the core issue rather than like a band-aid. Which, I think VAPS is a perfect example. Like, if people think VAPS is boring, the solution is not to change how the tie breaks work and mess with all the other objectives. The solution is to make VAPS less boring. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Jay. I think that would be interesting. I think that would require more work than even just like in a minor way tweaking the objectives would. So I don't know that end state. Let me put it this way. I think that end state, unless it's implemented in a way that is like fulsome and properly understanding of the nuance, I think we could end up in a much worse position with something like that than we currently have. Because you could end up with a stuff that's willy-nilly, and the objectives, really all the battle cards, but especially the objectives, like really foundationally affect how the game plays. And I would be like extremely careful about changing them on a permanent basis, much less on a recurring basis.
Well, I mean, but you're asking for changes, right? So what I'm saying is, with the state of it is, and what my belief is, their view of the game, I would rather have seasonal, because I know it'll change. Do you know what I'm like? I know that, okay, sure, maybe this objective isn't great. Like, let's say we'll take this conversation and say evaporators isn't great, but I know after Worlds we're going to get a new set of seasonal. You know what I mean? We would get another season objectives that would change up how things are. It just seems to me that no matter what happens, it's going to be bad. I would rather just not have it be static and be like. And be the one thing I always have to bring to.
It's just pure chaos instead of like intentional chaos instead of accidental chaos.
Yeah.
I don't know if chaos is the right word for that.
No, it is.
I think it's not. I think the other thing too is, if you look at it from like a developmental side, is let's say there's a problem with VAPS, and we need to, if we did the seasons thing, take VAPS out of this season. You now, as a developer, have a whole season to work on VAPS and figure out, how do we make this better? How do we improve this? And not a huge overhaul or a huge change, but how do we tinker with this a little bit so that way it's fresh next season, but still familiar and hopefully better next season. So I think it would just be depending on the nature of the changes. But I think you would find it would give a lot of breathing room to have those changes and to grow that.
Yeah, I just don't know that we have enough objectives right now to be pulling stuff out of rotation. And fair. I'm a little bit nervous that adding objectives would create more problems than it solves.
Would it really?
Especially when we have current objectives that could be tweaked in ways that are extremely minor to make them. Like Payload's the perfect example.
You think they're going to do that? Because they're tweaking them in the opposite way. We just got a forum ruling.
Look, I
That
can
just completely messed up.
Right.
Like,
this is wish listing, Jay.
yeah.
I can hope. I'm
let's,
making
no, you're supposed to be the realist here. I need you to
I'm
be
gonna blow your
realistic
mind
with
here.
me.
I'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
I'm one of those in that small percentile. I still bring payload. I don't care. Give it to me. Let's
You
play this game,
maniac.
baby. Come on. I don't give a crap. Let's go.
Tim, I know somebody.
This is why you lose.
Yeah, there was.
There's many reasons why I lose. There's so many reasons.
I mean,
why I
think
lose.
about from a design perspective. If you were like on the subjectives, there's a pretty good chance that one player will simply not be able to score any points before the game starts. Like that's not a good thing.
Horrible. No, it's a
Yeah.
horrible design space. No, it's absolutely horrible. It needs to be fixed. Absolutely. I'm still bringing it. It's
Yeah, that's fair. But and that's an example of like an extremely minor change that would like payload was a great objective before, and I think in
was
a
my
way
favorite,
that in a
honestly.
way that like was consistent with their philosophy of like because most often the thing that happened with payload is you would get this massive scrum where the payloads were supposed to where they intersected with each other, and sometimes you would get interesting paths where they did like one was passing in a T or anyway.
Sometimes you would get like one player that wants to fight a turn before the next player does, like just because of positions. It's like I don't want to really fight you, but I have to, and it's very interesting.
It's a really fun objective, and like I never had a boring game of payload, but
agree.
And that's like a super simple, very small tweak that changes it from unplayable all the way back to one of the best and most interesting objectives. And I think VAPS and payload are the two clearest examples of like quote unquote unplayable objectives, but I think some of the other ones could be improved to be more interactive also, if that's the goal. Do we want to do some quick hits on some of the other ones?
Sure.
Those are the two big ones. But yeah.
My next one is
we're going to need forum rulings to make sure we know exactly how to use all of them, because
it'll be clarified in a future update.
Clarified in a future update. KP is my next one.
Back in my day, KP was real bad. All right, so I'll still take.
Don't get me wrong. It was.
I know. I know you know. Yeah.
I was there. That got fixed very quickly, though. That was within months of the game coming out.
It did. How about that? What a concept.
But as it is now, although it is clearly better than it was, it is still an objective that's kind of all about the middle, and all about the middle specifically on the last turn of the game. I think it's not like completely uncommon, but I would say it's unusual for the home objectives to be relevant, other than like you got to leave a unit behind. It's mostly all about like how many unit leaders can I stack on the center objective on the last turn. And there's two problems I have with that. The first is that it's boring. Because often you get these situations where like both players are just kind of cagily trying to conserve units until the last turn, and then they just both rush the center. But also you get a lot of weird like rules interactions with like melee and pulling stuff off the objective, and like can stuff physically fit, and like how big is the terrain piece, and can it be blocked off by a vehicle, because it is the only objective that requires like physical touching. And I worry there's two changes that I would want to KP. My worry is that it just becomes like intercept that can have more things score it, but because of the two changes I think that would improve KP would be to add progressive scoring, so it's not all about turn 6, and then also make it a within range instead of touching, to remove the like weird melee pulling stuff off, blocking space with things that can't physically fit, etc. But then it's basically intercept, so I don't know if that's
I agree with you, but then it becomes intercept, except for the fact that
vehicles can score.
Vehicles can score, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny you say the home point doesn't matter. It does change sometimes, because I have won a couple games before with playing saber tanks where I just double move onto their home point, and be like,
oh, here's one. I've
kicked you off the point.
What if you made the home points score double the middle point?
Ooh.
So that way, if each player scores their home point, then the middle point is still basically the tie break, right?
Sure.
Like if each home point is worth 2.
So almost like a reverse intercept, where intercept double scores at the end.
I guess that wouldn't make a difference, because I mean, there would be situations where like one player can't score their home objective at all, and then you score your home objective, and if they score the middle, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
But I don't know. Maybe that could get weird, but it would make the home points matter.
Maybe you have range only matter for the middle point.
And the
it's
home
range
points are
one
base to base.
home points are base to base because they're your base. And then your middle point is the only one that matters as far as range one of the middle KP.
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Jay?
I don't care.
Man,
All right.
we caught you at a real salty.
I
episode
really
today.
just don't care.
All right.
And we started off with the hobby section of sprinkling physical salt onto models,
Yeah.
and it's only devolved from there.
I'm really sorry. I apologize to the listeners. I'm just so distracted by this whole rules from change. Like it's just like bothering me so much right now because it's like even if they made our wish list changes, right? Let's say they did the right thing. And or what we think is the perceived.
How do you touch your
Okay.
mic so much and it doesn't pick it up? Like if I tap my mic, anyway.
Because
sorry,
I'm
continue.
a professional. I'm not some. I'm
Is
not
that what that
like,
rubber band on your
yeah.
microphone says? Okay, go ahead.
What rubber band?
Isn't that never mind? Anyway, carry on.
It looks like a rubber band, but I think
looks
it's
like a
just
rubber
it's just part of the
This
part
right
of the
here?
nut. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gold plated, son. This is. I know you don't see gold where you're from, you poor redneck. But this is gold.
Does it matter if it's gold if it looks like a rubber band?
I guess not. I can't even see one of your shoulders, you nerd. So don't even tell me what's on my microphone.
That's fair. That's fair. Touche.
I'm just like at a loss right now because even if the objectives were right, some arbitrary ruling 10 years into the game is gonna screw it up. Like I just don't understand. I'm just flabbergasted by that ruling. I'm sorry. Like, listen, is it a huge deal to the game in general? No. I understand that it isn't. Is it a huge deal for that objective and force users? Yes. Like I played a lot of Luke, like OP Luke, and that's one of the tricks that you're like, oh, we're on recover.
It's like one of the reasons you play OP Luke.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, we're on recover. Yep. I know. Here's the plan. Well, now that's just not a thing anymore. And it's just like, well, then why am I doing any of this anymore? Oh, it's so frustrating.
It's
I'm
a
sorry.
massive nerf to force push.
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I know.
No, I get what you're
Tim,
saying.
You don't agree and whatever. I don't care. It's just like
I do pretty much. I don't know if it's massive nerf, but it is a good size nerf.
It's a big
to the
nerf.
force push.
It's
Yeah,
a big enough nerf that I'm like, because the reason. Okay.
I can't even talk about like actual. This is bothering me so much. Like, listen, listen, folks at home. I understand. We are just talking heads. Am I actually upset? Not really. I'm gonna go sleep in my nice warm bed and be fine after this. But like, for the context of this show, you know.
Yeah. Here's my thing with it, and then I think we should let that topic die.
No.
He's right, Jay.
It is a big nerf to force push because the reason that you take, in my opinion, the primary reason, almost the entire reason, at least that I take a force user, is so that I can play hostage and recover and be good at those and hopefully better at those than my opponent. It's the same reason like you take speeders so you can play bombing run, you know? Like this game is designed around the fact that certain list archetypes and certain units are good at certain objectives.
Yeah.
And for what appears to be kind of an arbitrary change, as Jay is harping on, it's essentially made it so that like the reason that you take Yoda is significantly watered down.
Yeah.
In a way that
feels
kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
Right. So explain, Kyle, let's explain this to people who maybe think we're like insane. You are basically in certain situations talking about a one activation turn and claim to a multiple activation point grab.
You mean if you don't have control over where the objective ends up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That like So, and usually when you're doing this, you're diving. I would say, turn 6, but you're diving the last turn. Like if you're up against time, you're diving in. You're gonna force pull them in. You're gonna move the objective so it's touching the base of your mini and their base, and then you're gonna kill the leader, and then you're gonna pick up, or the unit, generally the unit, but like you're gonna kill whatever is holding that, and then you pick it up with your second action, like that.
Yep.
So you can't do that anymore. So it
Right.
like the whole lead up into like getting your force user, diving your force user in, especially in today's meta, like
Where they can die to a stiff breeze.
yeah,
Right.
like
Well, I think that's what I was going to say too, is I think part of the issue is not so much like, I think if this was a change that affected like trooper squads or something like that, it's one thing because you're like, all right, we just have to learn to play around it, or we have to change how we're addressing this. That's fine. But I mean, we touched on this before when we were talking about force push in general, and force powers and force slots. It's this platform is so expensive, and now a huge part of why it's so expensive, a huge part of its cost is now gone. So now you're paying even more for a worse product. Like, let's take Legion out of it, right? Like if I give you something and then automatically make it worse and say, okay, but you have to keep paying for it, and you have to pay an exorbitant price for it.
Yeah.
For the same product that's now worse than what you initially thought you were paying for, you're going to be upset.
Yes, and I think for me, it's I'm trying to like, I know I'm very hostile about this, but like, because it's just
You're not
like
going to remove any of that suppression.
you're like erasing an entire type of unit from the game, and you don't like arbitrarily, like I don't even think they know they're doing it. They're just like, no, no, it doesn't. No, that guy gets to move the box, not him. Like, and they're like, okay, well, why is no one using force users anymore?
Yeah,
I don't know, because you took away one of their 2 only objectives that they're good on.
Well,
And
it's funny I just want to say it's funny we talk about that, because I was just building a list earlier, and I was like, can I fit a force user in here? And then I was looking at it, I was like, do I care? Do I care? And the answer is no. I'm like, no, because now what's my plan for that list? It's a very gunline heavy list. What's my plan? Shoot the force user as it comes in. that's it now. And with no deflect, it's gonna die.
Well, just none of it makes any sense anymore. Like, like your whole like strategy of like protecting yourself to grab the box, then grabbing the box, and then do it last first, and then first on the next turn to like hide behind something so you have the box. That's gone now. That's gone, because your next turn you're spending to move to then grab the box, and now you're down an entire activation and you're in the breeze.
I meant with no surging defense. Sorry, my bad.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I'm full of rage.
I know, but I caught myself.
I don't even know what
because someone's
saying.
going to be like, Tim, you don't know what the rules are.
Dude, like the I'm like a
months,
cartoon.
right?
Steam's just coming out of my ears right now. Like,
and
I don't usually get this upset about this stuff, but this is driving me crazy, because it's like, it's just like cut by what is it? Death by 1,000 cuts or whatever. Because it's just like, we're just arbitrarily changing every
You know
rule.
who's not making those cuts? Jedi.
Dude, yeah.
That's not what they're for anyway.
Because they're not even.
They're not like, for anything anymore.
Nothing they do makes sense. Because if you were doing this for fun, they're not even fun to play.
Like, now when
there's
someone comes
nothing,
over, is that Anakin on your shelf? Yep, he sure
right.
is.
There's nothing fun about this anymore. They just die to like, I don't know, somebody like looking at them wrong. They can't grab objectives. They can't do anything anymore. Like, what is the point anymore?
This is all a plot just to try and make Grievous look better.
There you go. Yeah. Don't need no force slots. They're bad anyway.
That's the long game. It's the long game. We're just blind.
I'm usually the common like, hey guys, it's just a game. It's fun, but this is real. This just like, that just sent me in a tailspin. Like, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing how just like, because what's next? What arbitrary ruling on the forum is next that we're just gonna let? No offense to whoever the mod is now but like, I don't think they have some like great think tank that like thinks through these things. Like, they probably just have like a little chat and they're like, hey, this was the question. What's the answer? Well, no, that's silly. Why would that?
So here's one more thing that I want to point out because I think this is interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Because this is also different from the previous RRG language that I noticed as I was reading this. That unit's controlling player may pick up any claimed objective tokens and place them in base contact with the unit leader. Can you choose to leave it? And then does it become unclaimed, or is it still claimed?
No.
Interesting.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because of the panic rules. Because right now there are situations where, now I guess this would not interact directly with the panic rules, because in order to move, you have to, you can't force push your own unit. So that unit would have to be activating to move. And if they were to panic while they were activating, they would just automatically drop the box anyway. But this is relevant for other reasons, because it could be like, like lateraling a football, right? You've got a unit that's like low on health that has a box. You leave the token behind for another unit to pick up, and that unit picks it up and keeps going. Like, is it optional to take it with you? Because it sure looks like it is now.
That sounds like a great forum post right there. That's a good forum question.
And that was not there before. That word "may" was not there before. So,
Right. We're just, like, this is the problem, right? Like, listen, I know some of you are at home going, Jay's out of his mind and you guys are taking this too far. But this is the problem that happens, is exactly what Kyle's saying. Well, based on all the wording and structure and the rules that we've had thus far, this is the same as the 501st within instead of at, right? Like, this is, words matter. Like, like, words matter.
And can we please acknowledge that was a mistake and just fix it? Like,
no,
everybody
they meant
knows
that, and they meant to make the ARC Trooper gun, what was it, 2 black instead of a red and a black, or whatever they did. All that's meant. That's on purpose. And so was the copyright Marvel
that part,
on
but okay.
Din Djarin's plastic. It's all purpose. No, I love this game. And when things like this happen, it makes me upset, because I see it less of a tiny, like, a mistake, and more as a domino that's gonna start tipping over other things, and it's gonna ruin it.
It's like a dam where you're trying to plug all the cracks with your fingers.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, and again, this goes back to what I was saying before. I think for me, the issue is I can deal with the cracks because we smooth them over. We address some things. Any game's going to have imperfections, sure. But it's the attitude behind it. And I want to know what the thought process is behind it. Let me know what's going on. And that's fine. And then we can patch over these cracks. But if you just don't care, then tell me you don't care. That's fine. But don't just gaslight me. Don't just Legion gaslight me into being like, no, we care. No, totally. Yeah. But now you can leave a box behind. And that's fine. Yeah. Which was totally intentional. Yeah.
Working as intended.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Everything is working as intended. Everything's fine. Pay no attention to anything.
I listen. I guess it doesn't matter, because I'm going to be playing Ewoks and not Force users. But I mean, it's just like,
I'm strongly considering just not playing Force users now, because
nub, I guess, everyone.
It's getting harder and harder to justify Force user.
Yeah,
they're expensive. They're extremely unforgiving to play. And like,
why would I play a Force user when I could just play a Wookiee chieftain?
Yeah, 60% discount for more durability, relatively same melee profile. Yeah.
Double move.
Yeah,
agile.
It's just like the last point changes hit the Force users kind of hard. The
deflect specifically.
Yeah, deflect. Deflect, the points increase on burst of speed. Like there was a few things. And then this just is another, like, I mean, for God's sakes, they had no legs. Now you've taken an arm. Like, I mean, what more do you want from them? What more do you want from these force users? I get upset because I want all these units to be viable. I want this game to be balanced, and I love this game, and it just upsets me. Especially, okay, you want to make a big rules and update and points update, and it all kind of makes sense together. And I know I at least understand where you're coming from. Maybe I don't agree with it, but I understand where you're coming from. It's just arbitrary answer in a forums that's gonna like derail an entire unit type, and it kills
and
me.
again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's
Yeah.
I don't know if they're taking the legs off of them yet. They're taking like one toe at a time.
No, the legs are gone.
Okay.
You can't use them. Can you run without legs? No, you can't
Right.
run without legs.
All right. Well, I hate to derail us to our secondary.
What was your
topic here,
original
but-
question? Don't even remember.
Well,
Something about objectives or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
stupid.
Well, I was gonna maybe
Seasons. I already
maybe the
answered.
other 5 objectives are basically fine. I don't know.
I
What-
think so.
Okay.
I think they're honestly, I really do. I think they're fine,
Yeah.
which is like that's the thing, right? Like that's actually a good place to be at.
Sure,
If it wasn't
yeah.
for torpedoing 2 of them, especially payload. Really,
Yeah.
payload is the one that got hit the hardest.
It's such an unfortunate casualty because it's like, why?
I really do think if you want to zoom out, if you want to put a nice little positive spin on it, I think we're really close to a good thing. I think we're just moving now, maybe slowly, maybe in the wrong direction, but we can easily fix it. It's so fixable. That's the good news.
100%. Yep.
It is so fixable.
Extremely fixable.
But I also like the bright side of things. So.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you, and I think that's why it's so frustrating. Why part of what makes it so frustrating is that the fixes are not complicated,
right?
And relatively small. Legion is a game where small changes have big impacts in both directions.
Yes, for sure.
So, yeah.
And I think the big thing too is it's not always just a points issue. Like, you need to look at more than just points. You have to look at more than just points, because these cards that we make that are beautiful and creative and interesting cards have a lot of text on them, more than just how many dice am I throwing and how many points am I paying to throw those dice. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff on those cards. And if we don't look at making sure that's all working effectively, then you're really like missing the point.
Yeah, right. And I think we need, I don't know. I just feel like sometimes this game has a really good foundation, right? That's why it's
True.
Why it's pretty balanced for the most part. Sure, there's some peaks and valleys, but
that's why it's exploded from non-existence to being one of the most popular miniatures games.
So I just
it's consistently what, number 2, number 3 normally?
It's like it's like 4-ish.
Okay, sure.
But when
Pandemic, it actually really did well, honestly. Oddly enough.
1 and 2 are pretty much always 40K in AOS.
Yeah.
So.
I think it was 3 for a while, but then BattleTech or whatever has really
BattleTech's had a huge
gone crazy.
resurgence, I feel like. But
BattleTech is still behind Legion. D&D miniatures is
MCP is
and
high.
MCP.
MCP
top 5 consistently now is 40K AOS, D&D miniatures, Legion, and MCP. And then X-Wing used to be on there, and now it's like not even in the top 10. Armada, impressively, is still in the top 10.
X-Wing's totally in the top 10. What are you talking about, Kyle? Everyone should buy my stuff off of eBay.
I don't know X-Wing, so I don't want to get in on that conversation. But the sales data is starkly different than it used to be. Let's put it that way. And I do not know enough about this conversation to have it, so I don't want to go there. But
I just So this game has got a good base. It's really strong. It's just like it'd
be nice if we could plug some of those holes.
Yeah, I would just encourage whoever is responding to things on the forums to maybe just like think about it a little bit more before making a response on a rules forum in which we actively use to play this game. Just think about it, or explain why it changed,
or explain, but also just like realize like you're not infallible. And that's not to whoever's writing the post, but it's just like to game companies in general.
Who
of
you
any
talking to?
game.
You talking to me?
No, Master J. You're the best, sir. Captain J, General J.
Yeah. You want to be on this
Mr. J.
podcast again, son?
I'm earning my pay.
Yeah.
So
Everybody makes mistakes.
Whoa! I told
Exactly,
Kyle
that's what I'm
not to
saying.
pay you. Did he
Everybody-
pay you? Because I told
No,
him.
that's
not
exactly my point.
Am
I get
am I
paid
in charge of
nothing.
that?
That's exactly the point. I get paid nothing so that I know I can contribute the right amount. But anyway, yeah, everybody makes mistakes, and that's okay. Like, don't pretend that you can't make mistakes.
Yeah.
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 Oh.
The biggest mistake is to not admit a mistake.
Let's talk about painting again. That's kind of my
Sure.
zen.
Painting is
Can we comment?
it's-
Let's
Was it?
comment
Because
down.
then you figured out what technicals
Actually,
are. And that kind
I
of
do
ruined
want
your
to.
zen.
So I finished ish. I finished Ventress.
Oh yeah.
She's great until you realize that I like completely messed up the OSL and it's like super red. Yeah, she's great from this angle. Less good from
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one.
Ever
cheese
since the
looks-
accident.
Yeah.
I might have. I made the mistake of like starting immediately with my new airbrush on the OSL
Ooh.
on Ventress.
Oh yeah.
And
It's
it
a bold choice.
it went on super heavy. And like once you do it, I need to go back and fix it, but
Yeah,
that's going to
fair.
require me to like repaint that whole area, and I don't have the heart to do it. So
I'm really excited in this new house. I'm finally getting my Legion like corner set up, and like my boxes of things that are unpainted and my pile of shame has just become like worse and worse. I can hopefully start working through it soon.
awesome. Yeah, I was a little bit scarred by that, but I need to jump back on it. I need to fix Ventress and I need to paint some other stuff. But yeah, be careful if you people do OSL with an airbrush. Just be careful because you can mess up your entire miniature.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. If you do it right, it's like super great,
Yeah.
super easy. If you mess it up, it will completely. Sorry, I almost forced you to have to bleep something out there. It will completely mess up your whole paint job.
It's that time.
Yeah, it is.
Jay's falling asleep at the mic. There it is.
Yeah.
No,
I really
yeah.
thought you did for a second.
No.
He just tuckered himself out. He's just
No, airbrush is because like because the control with your finger, right? And so
It's really easy to just be like,
yeah. So sometimes like everything's going great, and then the next minute it's like you're like, oh no,
oh, my finger slipped.
Yeah. Like you're getting tired, you've been airbrushing for a
Yeah.
while, and then your finger just goes back too much, and you're like, ah!
Yep.
My problem with my airbrush is right when I get the perfect consistency of everything getting out of the pot and getting through and not clogging the sprayer, it is empty. Like and then I run out. I'm like, all right, cool. And then I refill it and immediately I'm clogging. Like, all right, great. I love this. This is amazing.
And do you use flow improver?
Yes.
Okay. Do you use thinner?
Yes.
All right. Well,
I've
I don't know what to
noticed
tell you then.
there's some
I
paint,
just got to get it right. It's also been a long time since
Well,
I've done it now,
yeah.
so.
Also, I've noticed that, like, and I don't know if this is strictly with army painter, certain pigments and stuff are like they like thicken inside for some reason,
Mhm.
like really quick. And like white is one of those that
Yep.
just like is such a bitch. And like I hate it. And like you're like everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden you're like not spraying, and you're like,
Yep.
yo, what is going? And then you see that little like chunk like right on your needle, and you're like, dude, are you serious with this right now? Like we were just everything was fine. I've been cleaning you, I've been taking care of you, you know.
Yeah.
I've
That's
been
the worst is when you take it apart, you get it all working, and you're like, this is great. I've done everything I need to do. And you get it, and it sprays for like 30 seconds, and then it
Yeah.
clogs.
And then it clogs up
Well,
again. And you're like,
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. That's when I just step
Yeah.
away.
I generally like that's why. And Kyle, I think you've talked about this too, but like I try to use the airbrush in more general ways, and like I've just been using regular brushes and painting
Yep.
for so long that it's just I'm almost faster at it with certain things, and so it's just like, okay, I'm gonna do this with the airbrush, just get this general work done, and then I'll go in and use my brush skills for the rest of this. But it was funny. Somebody in our Patreon Discord server, I was putting on my MCP models, and somebody was like, "Whoa, Jay, I didn't even know you were that good of a painter." I go, "Yeah," because like Legion for me is so hard to like focus on because it's always
It's
seven
so
models or
it's so
eight
many
models,
things. Yeah.
of one thing, and you're just like, oh, dude, I don't care. I just got to get to this tournament. Like, you know what I mean?
That's
No.
my troopers look rough, but my individual characters often come out
Right.
pretty good.
But then when you get like, I'll show this for our listeners, but like you get a Luke Cage like this, and you're like, oh yeah, like one, I got this one guy, and I'm gonna paint him,
Yep.
and like you spend time on him, and you're done, and a unit's done, and you're just like, I did it. Like I have a whole one of my 10 units that I'm bringing is completely painted. So it's a nicer thing. It just and
That's fair.
yeah.
It's a mental lift to paint
Yeah.
a lot of like similar trooper units.
Yeah.
Because you paint that first guy, you finish him, you're like, maybe you're even doing assembly line. I don't know. Finish that first squad. You're looking at him, you're like, yeah, that looks great.
Yeah.
And then you look over, you're like 40 other unpainted guys, and you're like,
That's why I always start for Legion. I always start with my squad leader.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to make him look good
Mhm.
or better than
That's
the
smart.
other guys.
Yeah.
And then because he's going to be the last one left on the table.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, everybody else, whoever's
Well,
ugliest dies first. That's
it's
totally
like-
my rule.
I always do this thing where I'm like, all right, I'm going to assembly line, right? But what I got to do is I've got to practice on one and make sure I know what colors and how I'm going to do it. And then I spend so much time on that one that I just kind of like tucker myself out for the rest of them. And I'm just like,
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, God, I don't even care about this anymore. Like, I literally just wasted 3 hours of my time, like trying to get this, to get the assembly line, like color set. And,
It's the even nerdier version of that SpongeBob episode where he's like trying to write an essay and he just spends all that time writing It's that but in miniature form. It's like,
All right. Have we run out of things to talk about?
I mean, I could
just say yes, Jay.
You guys could get me
I see
angry
it.
about
I
force
see it on the
users
tip of your
again, and I
tongue.
could keep going.
No,
No,
I
I
see
won't.
it.
I won't.
No.
We'll cut it. It's been a good chunk of time.
All right.
Uh,
If I had to pick the thing that would get Jay animated today, it would not have been that. But
True. Yeah.
Well, it didn't at first, and then I just kept thinking about it, and it like more things kept happening in my head. I was going, oh, I didn't even think. Oh my God, what about this? Oh man, and then I started thinking about games that I won because of that, and like that's how I won, and that was the plan the whole time, and it worked. And now I'm like, well, that's not even a thing anymore. And so it just started stacking the rage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
All right. Let's close this. Let's close this a salty episode
I'm
out.
sorry for whoever's
Everything's
still
fixable,
listening.
everyone. Remember, it's all fixable.
It is
I'll
all
find
fixable.
you.
Listen, I know I'm usually the happy-go-lucky. It's just fun one. I
I
apologize.
don't know if I'm so
So sorry.
happy go lucky. More like I'm here, but yeah. It's fine.
Wow, Tim.
Hey, and you got both shoulders right now.
Yeah.
I lean forward for this.
Yeah.
Whoa, he's getting real tough. He's puffing his shoulders out at me.
I'm
Well,
actually slouching, but sure.
yeah.
Okay.
You call it
the
what you
opposite.
want. The old Tennessee puff. I see it.
I'm an hour away from you now.
Whatever we were gonna pay you, it's off the table now. We're
Oh.
renegotiating our contracts.
From
The
nothing to
trade
nothing.
embargo is back up.
You get paid by each visible shoulder. That's a percentage.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wear like a
We're gonna be
orange. I'll
taxing
wear
you.
a UT orange next time. There you go.
All right. We are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm angry.
And I'm Tim.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Bye.